My exhaust system looked like it was in pretty good shape, but I needed to inspect it pretty close to make sure. I took a wire brush and cleaned up the flanges there where it mounts up to the cylinders, able to inspect those for any cracks or anything, and looked the tubes over, and they all look pretty good. I took a wire brush and cleaned out the slip joints on them where they slip in and out of each other. The collectors, one of them comes off of the, I think, number 2 cylinder, and then comes around and goes to the number 3 cylinder, and then goes into the muffler, and then the other one goes from the number 1 cylinder and hooks into the number 4 cylinder and goes into the muffler. Anyway, they have slip joints where they slip together there under the center of the crankcase. Those were a little crusty. They came apart, so I cleaned those up. And then where they slip into the muffler, I cleaned those up. And I took the muffler and I cleaned it up, checked it out a few days ago, but I went ahead and took wire brush and cleaned the sockets out where the collectors come into the muffler there. I cleaned those out so they slide in and out freely, and cleaned those ends up of the muffler so I could inspect those for any cracks or anything, and that looks good. And I put the muffler shroud in solvent tank the other day. See, it was all crusty and nasty looking from oil dripping on it and stuff and heating up and cooking on it. I got it cleaned up. It looks pretty good now. Well, I put everything all back together on the muffler. It's sitting over there out of the way. These collectors here, one of the problems I have had with those is the flanges on those are so big and they're not relieved out any around the bolt holes. So the washers and the bolts never fit tight down against the flanges. And some of them are so bad that you can't get a wrench on them or anything. And we've cleaned them out before, but I just opened those up again and flattened them out on the flanges so we can get a good nut on them, get them torqued down right, and should be able to get a socket on them now. I don't know how many half-inch sockets that I've got that the mechanics have ground down on the outside so they'd fit in there. That's fine, but when you go to try to torque them down, then the sockets crack, and then they're no good. Well, every time they come up to do it, they wind up grinding a new socket for them. Anyway, those should work better now. I've got those kind of relieved out around those holes, so nuts will fit flat on there, and the socket should fit in on the nuts. So the muffler looks pretty good. That's ready to go on now, and the exhaust pipes. This tube here on the muffler shroud is an outlet tube for the cabin heat. There's a short piece of SCAT tube, S-C-A-T. It's a silicone high temperature hose. Anyway, that short section of it goes between the muffler and the control box for the cabin heat. Well, this one's getting kind of grungy. It's still serviceable, but it's kind of grungy. And I bought new SCAT tubing at Stoddard's in Anchorage when I was up there. So I think I'll cut off a new piece of tubing and make up a new hose to go between the muffler and the cabin heat box. And what I do on these, like this one here, is I cut these off a little bit long, pull that wire out quite a ways, cut it off and bend it so it stays in there because that wire keeps this hose from collapsing. And then I'll fold this back on itself and glue it down with some high temp RTV to kind of make a manufactured end on there, a thicker end on there. That's a little easier to slide on. It's not frayed out so bad, and it's tougher. It lasts a little bit longer than just a plain section there, that tubing. Now this tubing is kind of a silicone impregnated fabric, and it's got a string on the outside spirally wound around it, and then it's got this wire, this coil of wire that's a spring wire inside to keep it from collapsing. Problem with that is that spring wire wants to spring out and come out. So when you cut this stuff to make up one, generally you bend that wire in like that a little bit and then fold it down inside. Otherwise the thing just wants to unravel. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this out a ways like that, cut that wire off, and then bend it, fold it back down in there, push it down in there a ways so that it doesn't hang up on the tube when you slide it over the whatever fitting you're sliding it over. And then I can take this tubing and just either roll it in on itself like that or fold it over this way and roll it out. And that makes kind of a nice terminal end on that. It's a little tougher than just a frayed end like this. And I'll smear some high temp RTV in there inside of that, in between those seams, and glue that all together. That hose is now all made up. I've got it set on the muffler outlet tube there for the heat. I can mount that up on the engine now and try to fit that onto the cabin heat box. And those things have a tendency to stick to whatever they're clamped to over time. The heat and the silicone and everything actually glues it down, and it makes it tough getting it on and off. So I put a little bit of DC4 on the fittings or on the hose when I put them together. It helps them slide on there a little easier and helps them so they don't glue themselves down quite so bad. Easier to get off when you have to take it off. Well, it's going to be muddy out here for a little while now. It's pouring down rain out there. It's only been raining for about 15 minutes at the most, and water's starting to run down the driveway. Hope it don't wash it out. But it's been dry for over a month. Had record rainfall first 2 weeks in June, and then record high temperatures in June. And it's been dry since the middle of June. They haven't rained any. They've been forecasting rain for the last week. It'd get overcast and be clouds, and it looked like it was going to rain, but it never did. We actually even got thunder and lightning one day with no rain. It's raining now. That's good. This country is not meant to be dry. It was getting too dry here where it was getting to be dangerous. Actually take quite a bit of rain to fill things back up, the muskeg, and that's just like a big sponge. It was getting pretty dried out. It can rain like this for a couple of days and the creeks won't even come up. But the driveway got powdery on top, so it always takes a while after it starts raining to get that stuff compacted back down to where it's not mucky. And even the dogs went in the house. I put my exhaust system on. I put the muffler in there yesterday and hooked up that scat tube for the cabin heat, and that wound up taking me all day to get that doggone thing in there. It's just the way it's lined up and stuff. It was just hard to get the hoses to slide on the fittings on there. And I wanted to get this exhaust system on this weekend, but there's a special sealant that I use in the joints on the exhaust system. I've had it and I've used it for years. I had a couple of tubes of it, but when I went through all my stuff, I found one tube of it and it was dried up and wouldn't work anymore. So I went to Napa Saturday to pick some up, but they were already closed for the day by the time I got there. They closed early. Anyway, I didn't get this together. I was waiting to do that till I got that stuff. So I went down early this morning to the Napa store to get some, and they didn't have any in stock. Well, I had to dig in the garbage can and dig out the old stuff that I had, and I was able to get it enough to work. This is the number 3 stack here. It goes down in the collector, and I've got it set in the muffler now. And then the number 2 slides into that. It's got a slip coupling that fits into that. So here's the number 2 collector tube here. And like I said, this hooks up to the cylinder here, and then this slides into the collector that comes around to this right side. Now these flanges on here, they've only got 2 bolts holding them on. They're just 2 ears on them. The flanges on Continental 0470 and the 520 and the IO 520 and those like that, they're more square and they have 4 bolts on them, and so they hold down better and they seal up better. And the problem with these 2 ears is you tighten this ear and it's going to pull these 2 ends in and leave a little bit of gap here on the sides. Even with a heavy flange like this, there's a certain amount of that. So the standard gaskets that they use on these are thin sheet metal, either steel or copper, and they have a circle pressed into them that's proud above the sheet metal. Well, they don't work with a crap. They blow out right away. And some guys take them and use 2 of them together, put one way and one the other, and put them on there, and they still don't work worth a crap. They still blow out. Well, the best ones to use are these spiral, they call them spiral wound gaskets. They're real thick, and they have a kind of compression piece in the middle of them here, and they don't blow out. But they can still leak. When I was working on my Cessna 170 a lot, in the old 300 engine, The muffler on that, the exhaust stack on that, had slip couplings that went together with clamps around them, and they always leaked. I tried all kinds of things to keep them from leaking. Most of the muffler cement that you get has got silica in it or something like that, and it cooks in and it gets hard, and it works for a while, but the vibrations eventually cause it to crumble out. A lot of guys use this high temp RTV silicone. That's the wrong thing to use. It says it's good for what temperature on here, 1,000 degrees or something like that. But as you use it, as it runs through heat cycles, it loses its high temp resistance, and that stuff will eventually catch on fire. It deteriorates and falls apart, but it can catch on fire. I found this stuff here. I think I tore this bag up. Oh yeah, here it is. It's a Seal 35959, and I got this at Napa. Walker mufflers and exhausts, I think they have the same thing. It has the same number on it. This stuff is Tenneco, but I got it at Napa. Anyway, this stuff, it's nasty as it gets on and it sticks to everything and it makes a mess, just like Anti-Seize Compound or the PRC 5200 or a lot of these other things that I use. You get it on your fingers and it sticks to it, and it migrates from one thing to another, and it's hard to get off, but it seals up really good and it doesn't get hard, so it almost lubricates these slip connections like this, so they'll slide in easier, and when you go to take them apart, they're not all rusted up and froze together, and you can get them apart. This stuff doesn't harden up like the silica based stuff. Well, this stuff's gotten kind of old and it's kind of harder than it used to be, but I just smear it on there and it fills in the gaps. It's not meant to seal up big holes or anything like that. It's just meant to go in here on gaskets and help seal that up. I put it on the gasket and put the gasket up onto the cylinder, and then I've spread it out here on this slip coupling and up here on the flange, and I'll go ahead and go put this in. And that stuff, I've never had a problem with that stuff leaking when I put it on. That solves the exhaust gases leaking, but it comes apart. You can get everything back apart again. Keeps it from burning, rusting up from getting the high heat cycles and stuff like that. The stuff to get, as far as I'm concerned, putting exhaust systems together. Now I'll slide this tube. It slides inside the other one, and that kind of lubricates it, helps it slide in there easier. I'll clean up the excess when we get it done, and well, you do it right, everything goes together easy. I had assumed that the number 3 and the number 2 cylinder went together in the same collector, but it's not. It's the number 3 and the number 4 cylinder, and the number 2 and the number 1 cylinder. There's those all hooked up. They slid together real good. I'll go ahead and clean off the excess stuff on there, put the other nuts on, and tighten this one up. This is the clamp here that clamps the muffler down on the collector, and there's supposed to be a little pin in that goes down in here to line up the muffler and the collector together so they stay in alignment, and that pin is broken off of that clamp, so I'm going to have to see what I can do about putting a new pin in there. Well, we had pretty good rain there for a few hours. I think it was supposed to rain a half an inch or something like that today. Normally in a normal rain you'd take all day to get that, but that came off there pretty good. We've got a whole bunch of buckets and stuff under the eaves of the shop over there to collect water for the dogs to drink out of and use it to water the plants and stuff, and those were all empty. They got filled up and washed a lot of the mud and dirt and stuff down the driveway and out into the highway. I don't know how much rain we got, but we collect rain off the roofs of the house and the cabin for our domestic water for drinking and washing and stuff. We've had a month without rain, so I don't know how much our water level was going down, but that little bit of rain shower that we got should have brought it up a bit, so that's good. Not complaining about that at all. On the number 1 and the number 2 collector, I was holding off because the locator pin in the clamp that locates the muffler to the exhaust pipe was missing. This is the clamp, and this is where the pin goes right here, and you see the pin's missing on that. So I was setting up to go up to get my welder out and stuff and make a pin to stick in there and weld it in. And I just wire brushed the outside of this, and I was going to wire brush the inside. I got to thinking, I bought spares clamps for some of these. So I come over and looked in my stash, and sure enough, I've got a spare clamp for that. So I can go ahead and put that on, and I can worry about, this clamp is still perfectly fine, the used one, except for the pin is missing in it. So I can go ahead and fix that at my leisure and go ahead and put this the number 2 side on. The number 2 side goes on first, and then the number 1 side slides into the number 2. There it goes. Okay. I'll get it in. Alright, there it went. There we go. Now I'll get a nut started. Nut started on this number 2 flange. Oh yeah, when you do it right, it goes easy. Alright, now I'll torque those down. The book says to torque them down to a minimum of 40 inch-pounds. So that's what we'll do. The exhaust system is on. Got the exhaust tied down, muffler's tight in there now, and I've got plenty of clearance between it and the firewall. Anyway, that's all on. I've got them torqued down to the cylinders, the gasket's on. I got that clamp on the left side over there tightened down. There's a brace here that comes down from this cylinder, and then there's another rod that goes from here on down to the stack, the lower stack, the exhaust pipe. I've still got to put the EGT probe, goes in this little hole right here. I've got to route the wire for it and hook it into the EGT lead, and of course hook up the cylinder head temperature on the other side and run it into that lead. And I've got to make up the scat hoses. There's a hose that goes from an opening here in the shroud, in the muffler shroud, that goes up to a vent hole that comes out through this back of this baffling here on the right side, and then there's a long one that goes from the front lip on the left side all the way back. Then there'll be a hose that comes out of this lower shroud, comes up here and goes in for the back seat heat, and then there's one that goes from the lower shroud here and goes over to the air box there for the carburetor heat. So I still have to make up those hoses. One more thing off the checklist.